to continue, we can use the API from from the people who developed we can use the library from the people who developed the API, or we can write our own. Now, what happens if we have, we want to use some external data, but the external data has not been exposed through an API? Can we still do that? And yes, we can still do that. Let's look at something. Let's look at, let's say, a site for the university. And if, for example, I want to get from the console something like all links, I'd be able to do this, right? So query selector all links, right? So that gave me all links. So I'd want to do something similar from the server. So I have two approaches here. Now, I could, if I look at view page source, I could just get this source and extract something from it. Now, obviously, I'm going to have some complications because on my server, I have a console application. I have no concept of window, for example. So I can have two approaches. One of the approaches is going to be simpler, which is just read this file and just build my own DOM. And on my own DOM, select something. So let's just see how we'd go about that. So we're going to do something which is going to do Bing search first. So let's go to Bing. And if I inspect this, let's search for something. Let's search for test. I can foresee that in my URL, I could construct a URL which contains the search terms. Okay. If I look for special test, I can see that my parameters are encoded in some fashion because my space has become a plus. And the response is my parameters are URL encoded. Now, if I delete this part, let's see if we can make it simpler. If I delete this part, I'm going to just get this, which is a lot more simpler. It's a lot simpler to understand. And this is still going to work. Okay? So this is the minimal URL. Now, how would we get the results? Let's inspect one of the results. And we can infer that it's something with B algo class, and there's an H2 and an A. Let's test this out. So we're going to have this. And it gives me 10 results, which seems to correspond to how many results I have on a search result page. 10 results. Each page has 10 results. Okay, so all that's left is to be able to do this on the server. Let's see how we go about that. So first, we need the actual page. We need the actual page by using our actual search string. One sec. So we're going to make a Bing search library. Now, Bing search library is going to have one function, search, which is going to be exposed through module exports. Now, if I'd want to test it, I could just call it here, okay, and it would say search something, and then, depending on the results, just show the results. So how does this work? Now, obviously, this returns a promise because I want to have it thenable. I want to put a then after it and use it like I would here. This is going to make it really easy to integrate with my pre-existing code. Now, inside, I'm going to take my search URL, and I'm going to just populate it with something. And we've already met this kind of string. This is a parameterized string. It's stored between backquotes. So this part, $ and a couple of curly braces, this is going to be evaluated. Now, since my terms might contain spaces, I can't actually send them in an URL. So I can URL encode them. I've URL encoded them via a particular library which is called URL encode. And you see I've actually required URL encode and something which is called Cheerio. Now, what's going to happen here, I'm going to say request, which is request promise, dot get the search URL. So I'm going to get the page I've just seen. Now, in that page, what I'm going to get from request is the content of the page. So what I see if I do view page source here. So what I'm going to get is this. It doesn't look particularly friendly, but somewhere around here it contains the actual result. So what I want to do is have something which is a DOM on the server. So I'm going to go cheerio.load the content. Now Cheerio is designed to work somewhat like jQuery. We've not looked over jQuery explicitly until now because we can do most of what jQuery does through JavaScript itself. But I've loaded the document and I can then pass a selector to it. See? So it's $of the selector. I'm going to get a series of results. I want to treat them as an array of results. And for each result, I'm going to extract the reference, so the link, and whatever was written in the result. Now this part is something which eliminates HTML code, because in the actual results from Microsoft, what I get is the text itself, but it's marked with emphasis, for example. So it has something which underlines the text and so forth, which emphasizes the text. So it has strong and tags like that. So what I'm supposed to do here is actually get just the text. So I'm going to get objects which contain in the link key are going to contain the href of the result, and in the text they're going to contain the text of the result, right? So let's look at this again, right? So the link where I'd go, and the actual text of the result. Okay, so my API using this is again going to be a minimal API. It's just going to say get search of terms. It's going to call my search function, which I get by requiring Bing search, my library, and then it's just going to give me the content. Let's test this out. All right, so let's go to that. Cheerio. So how Cheerio works is by building an equivalent DOM without the rendering part on my server. Right, so if I go to localhost/search/kitten, it's going to give me kitten results, right, which are going to contain the link and the text. So I might be able to integrate them, even if, for example, the search engine wouldn't expose a particular API. Now, obviously, I can't do a million requests to them because that would be not necessarily civilized, A, and B, because they might ban me. So I'm not going to be able to do things like this on a large scale. However, I'm going to be able to test this, and they do have a service which is paid for, in this case. Now, what happens though, if some of my content isn't present when I do view page source, right? What if some of my content, what if the application I'm trying to extract data from is an application much like what I'm trying to construct, like a single page app, right? So it's something which is heavily JavaScript focused and which populates much of the content through JavaScript. What am I going to do then? Well, I can't do this. I'm not going to get the values I need in the source. So I have to get them somehow differently. The way I can do this is by actually running a browser. Right. Well, this is an interesting concept. So I'm going to run a browser as something in my application, and I'm going to just navigate to the browser to the required page, and then I'm going to run some JavaScript, which I've written on the page of the page I'm trying to extract data from, and get the result. Okay, so how would I want to run a browser? Now, obviously, if I'm doing it in a console application, I'm going to have to do something more than what I'm going to show you here, which is I'm going to have to run the browser headlessly, which is without an actual screen. I'm not going to have a screen. But the gist of it is going to be the same, which is that I'm going to, in this case, run Chrome, use Chrome to navigate to the page, and then extract something from the page. And the advantage of doing this is that Chrome already knows how to execute JavaScript. And it will have executed the JavaScript for the whatever populated the page with results. So I'm going to get a page which is fully rendered. So JavaScript has been executed, the page has been painted. Right? So I can answer questions such as where is an image positioned, if I'd want to ask that question. But I'm also going to have going to be able to answer questions such as what a dynamically populated list contains. Now, the way we're going to do this is by using something which is called Selenium. Did you run into Selenium until now? Selenium is usually used to define test cases, right? Because if I write a web application, I'm going to want to be able to define test cases, right? I'm going to want to be able to define certain inputs and certain outputs, which I'll obtain based on those inputs. The reason for this is that I'm going to actually want to define test cases for all aspects of my application, because a new programmer which is not equally familiar to that particular piece of code as the old programmers might write something which would break pre-existing code. And by running the test cases, they'd be able to notice this and refrain from breaking pre-existing code and not introduce further errors. Now, the way this is going to work is like this. I'm going to have an extract.js, which is going to actually use Google search engine to get results. So I'm using Selenium WebDriver. I've opted to install my browser, which is going to be called Chrome Driver. And we're opted to install my browser for this particular project, which leads me to this bit of a workaround, which just tells it where to get it. It's actually installed. So if I look in the node modules, I'm going to have something which is just called Chrome Driver. I have it here. Okay, and I'm opting to wrap the functionality of my extracting logic within an object. Why? Because I'm going to want to create a browser, which is going to be done like this. So this driver is new WebDriver builder for browser Chrome build. And then I'm going to want to close it at some point. The problem is that if I just do a function which opens the browser, does something, closes the browser, I'm going to get a lot of overhead. Because as opposed to everything we've done until now, opening an actual browser is going to take a lot of resources. So I don't want to do it every time. So it returns a promise. Again, the promise is going to be something based on a resolve function and the reject function. I'm going to just navigate, right? So this is going to be an actual, we're going to see it immediately. It's just going to open a browser, and the browser is just going to navigate to that page. Then it's going to select something which is named Q, which is what? Let's see. Right, so if we go to Google, right, we just go to Google, and if we inspect this, we're going to see that this has the name Q somewhere. Name Q, see? I'm going to get this control, and I'm just going to write characters in it and press enter. So if you look at the code tends to suggest this. So it's just going to say get by name whatever, send keys terms. So I'm going to write my search string there, and then send an enter key. It looks more like a macro than anything else. I'm just going to use the browser. Then I'm going to, Selenium itself is an API which is going to, is an API and a tool which we're going to encounter in basically all languages. And it's going to be used for testing web applications, which means that it's not going to be written just in an asynchronous form. This would fit very well with JavaScript, but it wouldn't fit with other languages. So I have stuff which is called wait. I have wait. So I'm going to wait at most 1 second, let's say at most 3 seconds, until the title tells me the page was loaded. Then I'm going to execute a particular script. And what I'm doing is loading Google's page and then running some JavaScript on their page. Make sense? It's just like it's just like I've opened the console as a user and run some JavaScript in the console. So I've run the page, and in relation to that page, I'm running some JavaScript. And what I'm running is query selector all of the results. How did I find out what the results were? Well, I can find out just like I did before. So test. And if I inspect it, I'm going to be able to infer that it's something an H3 with class R, which contains an A. I'm just going to navigate the document just like I do for CSS selectors. And I'm going to get the result. So if I look at my code again, right, I'm just getting the href attribute. All right, so I've got this covered. Let's see how this works. Now let's also see how we integrate it with the API. Our API is again very simple, so it just says search.getContent of terms, and with the content it gives me the content. Okay, so node API.js. Right, and something which you've not seen is this. This is the browser, and it says Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. Okay, so let's go into another browser window, go to localhost, and tell it to do stuff. Let's see if I'm fast enough to show you. So it's localhost / I think it was search again. So it's search kitten. That's it, just navigate it here. So all I have to do to run this in a console is somehow convince it to not display things on a screen. And actually, it does work like that. It doesn't necessarily need an actual browser. But by having an actual browser, we can see what happens. So let's search for another kitten, not this one. Let's search for another kitten. We've messed something up here, but it would be fixable, of course. Again, let's look at our browser. Right, another kitten. It actually goes to Google, it inputs the stuff, and it searches. That's how we can use this. Now, if you want a continuation of this principle, there's an article I wrote, which actually does something even more interesting, which is it takes Google Maps and it modifies Google Maps before it's loaded in the browser. Because I can do this. I can pass it through a rewriting proxy, and the proxy is going to modify Google Maps itself, so it has some external hooks. And for example, Google Maps is going to give me all the map markers in an area, because it's going to have slightly modified logic. I'm going to run a modified Google Maps for a pre-existing site in my browser via Selenium and extract stuff by doing that. So if you're interested, anyway, you can probably find it on the site for the conference of the faculty, and if not, you can mail me and I can give it to you. Okay, so if you have any questions.